Now. So my name is Olivia. I'm the student engagement intern on this call, and I'd just like to welcome everybody to one of our summer resource workshops. This is obviously Math 101 with Dr. Wendy and Sethi, and we're here to just give you kind of a quick presentation, and there will be some time for questions at the end, so just hold them until the professor is done. Thank you guys so much.
Well, welcome. I first just want to kind of introduce as far as who I am and why you're sitting here listening to me and talk about math. So I'm Dr. Sethi. I'm Director of Developmental Math. I'm a Senior Faculty Associate for the Department of Math and Computer Science. And I'm also the coordinator for the math placement. So many of your placement results have been crossing my desk and me determining as far as where you're going to be going. My idea for this session is to kind of start off as far as talking about math in general and how it's different than other subjects that we take. And part of that is just laying the groundwork for us to talk about how you place yourself and how you feel you are about your math foundation, and then what we have assessed and figured out as far as your math foundation to set you up for success in your college level math class. And then we'll go on. I have some advice to share with you and some information as far as resources that you'll be able to use to be successful in your math classes here. So let's get started. So hopefully, so let's talk about learning math in general. So the first place that we want to talk about is why learning math is different from learning any other subject. And first is expectations. In math, we expect you to understand the material, process the material, apply what you've learned to solve a problem correctly, and then remember what you have learned in order to learn new material. If you think about some of the other classes that you've taken, say, for example, political science requires you to learn about politics and public service, but the professor's not expected to you to run for governor or to pass the class. All right. And that would be an application of taking the concepts that you're learning in political science and then applying it to solve problems. Certainly, say, for example, psychology classes require you to understand the concepts of different psychological theories, but you won't have to help a patient overcome depression just to pass the class. And that's a difference because for our math class, we expect you to not only understand the concepts, but to also use that information to solve math problems. So that's the first difference. The next is that math is based off of sequential learning. And if you think about as far as construction goes, is that we've got building blocks, we've got process that's involved with constructing. If you think about it, if we were building a house, clearly we would start in the basement and we would build the basement, then the first floor, then the second floor, and then the roof. But for other classes, like say, for example, in a history class, if you study chapters 1 and 2 and do not understand chapters 3, and end up studying and taking a test on chapter 4, there's a possibility that you'll pass anyway because the tests are not so lockstep as far as the process goes. But to succeed in math, however, each previous chapter needs to be completely understood before you can continue on to the next chapter. So if you think about it, I compare studying mathematics to climbing Mount Everest, is the fact that you have to be well prepared. You have to have your backpack, you have to have your supplies, and then you start your ascent up to the peak. So with that in mind, you're going to want to think about how strong your foundation is and where you have been as far as your math goes and where you want to be. And also, if, for example, you were really good as far as, say, calculus goes, you may have forgotten some of the basic algebraic concepts that you might need in some of your other classes. I also like to remind people that math is a foreign language. I teach statistics for science, and a lot of the students that I end up seeing have taken at least Calculus 1, and then they end up in my class. And they think that they're going to have a regular statistics class or a regular math class. And I tell them that there are going to be times where I am going to be speaking English, and they'll be able to recognize that I am speaking English, but they have no idea as far as what I'm talking about, because we end up using English language to describe things in math and statistics that are using the words different than we would use on a day-to-day basis. So we need to remember that, like any other foreign language, we need to remember that we need to read it, we need to write it, and we need to be able to speak and hear the language. So math is also a skill subject. So I always think about as far as learning how to ride a bicycle. So when you're first learning to ride a bicycle, you're usually motivated to learn because you've seen someone else riding a bicycle and they make it look so easy. And you'll watch them and you take note, okay, what are they doing? And then you say, okay, yes, I'm ready to learn how to ride a bicycle. And then you get on the bicycle, and all of a sudden you realize the fact, there's a lot more going on than what I could actually see. And so when we're learning to ride a bicycle, we have to do it. We have to practice. We have to experience how to hold the balance while we're sitting on top of the bicycle, and how to keep our balance as we are moving along. And the more that we do and the more that we practice, the more comfortable we are riding the bicycle, until we can whiz around corners and go really fast, and maybe even ride without hands on the handlebars. And the same thing is true as far as math goes, is that math requires you to do the problem. So it's not enough just to sit in a lecture hall and watch the professor do the math problems. Is you've got to take that information and you've got to take note as to how the professor is solving the problems, but also taking that information and saying, okay, now I need to do this. And one of the things that I do in my math class is that I encourage my students to be ready to solve problems. So I might do a problem and then I'll turn to them and say, okay, now it's your turn to solve a similar problem. And as you're going through and you're solving those problems, what you'll want to do is you will want to ask questions. If you're not sure as far as how to do something, or the professor has written something up on the board and you're not sure as far as how they got that particular result. It's really important for you to ask the questions. I would much rather be involved in a conversation with people than just sitting there solving math problems. Though I do like solving math problems. I love solving statistics problems even more. Math is a speed subject. If you think about it, math is taught faster than any other subject that you have, and we do more material in less time. The other thing is that oftentimes math tests are really time tests. We expect you to be able to answer a certain number of problems in a certain period of time. So that means that we've got to not only know how to solve the problems, but we need to do it in much faster than, say, somebody asking me to write an essay about Robert Frost's poem. That is like a real small thing, and I have to think about it versus going into a pre-calculus test where I probably have a half a dozen problems that I have to solve in a very short period of time. So next thing I wanted to just talk to you about, since we have this idea as far as the difference of what a math class is like compared to some of the other classes, is that it's really important for you to have a firm idea about your math foundation and also the type of learner that you are. We learn differently in the different subjects. So on one hand, you may be more of an auditory learner in a history class, but then when you get into a math class, you need to see how a problem is solved, as well as having the soundtrack there of being able to hear the thought process behind solving those problems. So what I'd like you to do, just for a moment, is to take a minute or two and just think about your math history. What were your previous math grades? How long has it been since you took a math course? When you look at your math history, were there semesters or years where you didn't take a math class? I know that a lot of people who come to Seton Hall, they've taken math for 12 years straight, maybe even 13 if you're counting preschool. But I also know that we're living in a time where we had a little interruption as far as taking a math class in a traditional way of being in the classroom with the teacher. And it's kind of thinking about as far as how that has affected what you remember, how you're doing as far as that last math class that you're taking in high school. What things are you looking at that you say, gee, I remember seeing this 2 years ago, but I don't remember how to do this. Also think about what happens when you've been away from math a couple of months. Now you're gonna be finishing up as far as maybe that last math class, maybe this month, maybe last month you were done. And you've got 2 to 3 months before you're taking a math class in the fall. I want you to remember something really, really important though, is that there are some real big differences as far as how things operate in a college level math class than it does in a high school level math class. So before I get into that, I did want to mention as far as the math placement. So I'm hoping that most of you who are on this call with me have taken your math placement test. We really wanted everybody to get done with their math placement tests by June 1st. If for some odd reason you haven't taken the test, please make sure that you take care of it as soon as you can. We want to make sure that the advisors have the most up-to-date information about your math background and what we think you're going to be ready to take on and succeed. So one of the things I want to really stress to you about the math placement is that it is possible, especially if you're in the STEM fields, that you're going to end up getting placed into a math class that you've already taken in high school. And I want you to know that we're not trying to penalize you or anything like that. No, what we're trying to do is we have the math placement test set up so that if you take it and you're really honest about what you know and what you don't know, is the fact that you will be placed into a class that you're ready to succeed in. We want your first math class to be a positive experience. We don't want you to get in over your head. We want you to go in with a firm foundation so that you succeed and you are going to be on the path of success for your college career. So the math placement test is set up in a 3-part system. We want people to at least do parts 1 and parts 2. If you're in STEM fields or you're required to take calculus, and if you're not sure whether or not you need to take part 3, you can email me and I'll respond back to you as quickly as possible to let you know whether or not you need to take part 3. But most people are taking parts 1 and part 2, and you just need to pass one of those 2. And we have those 2 being kind of like an either or an or, because we realize the fact that some people may remember the concepts in Algebra 1, or they may remember the concepts in Algebra 2 just because it was closer by, or they took a pre-calculus class and they remember the stuff that's more related to what we would say is college algebra material versus a more basic algebra class. Most students will be placed into a statistics class, but we do have at least one other class that students will take if you're not in the business school, and that is a math perspectives class, which is kind of like a liberal arts sort of math class. If you're in education, you would take math for education, and it's a 2-course sequence that is going to be really focusing on the math and how to teach the math that you'll need to teach if you're going into elementary education. And then if you're a business major, you're going to be taking finite math for business. Now it does have with calculus, but the calculus is really, really small part of the class. Most of the class is really focused on finite math. Those of you who are possibly going through as far as the calculus track, there's college algebra, pre-calculus, calculus 1. Depending on which science you're going into, if you're math and I think the physical sciences, you tend to keep going as far as doing calculus 2 and 3 and on and on and on from there. If you're in the biology sciences, as well as chemistry and computer science, then after calculus 1, you'd be coming over to take statistics for science. And that's one of the classes that I teach that I absolutely love, but you know. I'm biased as to, I think students should be taking statistics, but that's just me. So once we figure out as far as where you're placed, and I will say that in the past we've used the SAT and the ACT score to also help moderate, figure out as far as where to place people. And we do use the AP exams, particularly the calculus, to help as far as placement goes. But we find that the placement test is really a good measure as to which class people should be going into. And like I said, if you've got any questions about the placement or what your placement is or what math class you're going to be taking, the math class that you're going to be taking is something that your advisor is going to tell you about. What your actual placement is or how many parts you need to take, you can contact me to ask me that question. All right, so I oftentimes get the question, what if I'm placed in a class that I already took in high school? And this usually happens for the students who are in the STEM majors and they get placed into pre-calculus. And this is where I want to talk about some of the differences between a high school math class and a college math class. So college math classes, level math classes, can be 2 to 3 times as difficult as a high school math class. And there are several reasons for this. First and foremost is just the amount of time that we have with our students. In high school, you're usually meeting with your math teacher, maybe, 5 days a week, maybe less if you're working with a block schedule, but you're also covering material over a much longer period of time. So say, for example, with pre-calculus, is that in high school, pre-calculus would be a full year class, and that would be the pre-calculus and trigonometry. It would take the full year. You've got all that time. For us, pre-calculus with trigonometry is 1 semester. And I have my students for a total of about 3 hours per week. I teach the class 2 times a week, and so 2 times a week is 75-minute period of time, either Monday or Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday. So very brief period of time. If you have the class on a 3-day schedule, then that's going to be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 50 minutes. Again, short period of time, but we're crunching all of that material into that time period. Now, if, say, for a pre-calculus, it happens to be a 4 credit hour class, so again, that meets for 2 times a week. In that class, I meet with my students for 1 hour and 20 minutes on Mondays and Wednesdays or Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then if it's a 3-day-a-week class, they're meeting for 75 minutes. And that's for a total of 220 minutes per week. So it's very short period of time, and a semester is 16 weeks long. So we're covering, easily 10 to 12 chapters worth of material in a short period of time. The other thing is that we cover a lot more material, but we also cover it as far as depth goes. So our expectations are not only that you can answer the simple problems, but the more advanced problems. Also, the responsibility for learning shifts. In kindergarten through 12th grade, the number 1 person responsible for your learning was your teacher. Your teacher had to make sure that you learned, or was supposed to make sure that you had learned the concepts for the class. So they would be constantly checking, they would constantly be assessing your progress in mastering the material. In college, the responsibility for learning is now on your shoulders. The professor is here to facilitate your mastery. We are experts on the material, so we're going to share with you what we know of the material. We're going to give you homework, which we may or may not collect or even grade. And we're going to give you tests, though, that are based off of maybe the homework that you've been given and the lectures and the material in the textbook. And it's going to be up to you to make sure that you have mastered that material. So you're going to need to realize the fact that things are going to shift a little bit. And so that first week of class may not be that slow easing into the material that you may have been used to in high school. In college, we hit the ground running, especially as far as math class goes, since I'm limited as to the amount of time that I have to cover the material that I need to cover for the class. I am, hopping right into covering the first couple of sections. And I might not go through and say, well, you remember in this class, and do a very thorough review of the material. No, I'll probably say, make sure that you review how to factor trinomials before the next class, if I even say that. So it's just making sure that you want to kind of be as strong as possible in your foundation before you're going into the class. And then the final thing that I have on this slide is the college grading system. And so is realizing the fact, and here again, this more has to do with the students who are doing multiple math classes, is that most of those math classes require you to get a C or better to be able to move on to the next math class. If you're in a major where you only have to take one math class, say for example the statistical models, then you're good to go. You're going to start off strong, you're going to do well in the class, and then you're going to move on to the other classes that are going to be more challenging to you for your major. For the business majors, please remember the business finite math with a calculus is what we would refer to as a gateway course. And that's a course that's really important to the business school. So you will want to get a C or better in that class. So I talked about as far as getting placed. If you get placed into a class and you're thinking to yourself, I don't need to be in this class, I want to be in a better class. Like, so say for example, we end up placing you into developmental math. Well, the reason why you've gotten placed into developmental math might be because you've got a shaky math foundation. And my goal as being director of developmental math is that I want my students to come out and go into that college level math class with a firm math foundation as possible. So there are some things that you can do this summer to improve your math placement or improve your math foundation. And that is the program that we have called the Math Bootcamp. I do have information about this posted where the math placement test is located. And if you're interested in the program, send me an email and I'll be happy to email you the information there. So the Math Bootcamp is an online self-paced program that helps you identify the math concepts that you know, as well as identify the math concepts that you need to know and need to master. There are 3 levels to the math bootcamp. You don't have to take all of the levels, and you can jump into a particular level depending on what math class you are interested in taking or that you're preparing for. So we've got the prep for college algebra, which is appropriate for all majors. We have the prep for pre-calculus for supporting our science majors or those majors that are going into pre-calculus or calculus. And then we have our prep for calculus. Now, I will say that if you do enroll in the math bootcamp with the goal of improving your placement, you will need to complete the program before the middle of August so that you can be reassessed for your placement and you have time to change the math class that you're going to be taking. If you're just using the math bootcamp to help rev up and get ready for the fall semester, then you have up until the end of August to finish up the class. It's a low cost option. It's about $40 for a 6-week access code. I supervise it in the sense I'm there just to see how people are going. If you've got some questions or you're not sure how to solve a problem that you encounter within the program, I'm here as a resource. All right, so how are we going? Well, we're now in our math class. So these are some things that you want to consider if you're taking your first math class in the fall. That's a really good idea to do. If you're not able to take your math class in the fall semester, that's okay, but please make sure that you take your math class within your freshman year. That way, especially if you're taking the statistics class, you're not too far away from the last time that you took a math class. So here's some advice for you about what to do for your math class. First and foremost, the most important test that you will take in a math class is that first test. And you want to do everything that you possibly can to get an A on that first test. Now, it shouldn't be too bad to get an A on that first test if you prepare for it. So that means that you need to review all of the problems and all of the exercises that the professor has given you. You need to make sure that if there was anything that you forgot from your math classes before, that you buff up on it. But the nice thing about that first test is that first test tends to be the easier test out of all of the tests that you're going to take in the class. So since it's an easier test, it means that with a bit more work, you're going to do really well on that test. And if you get an A on the first test, the likelihood of you keeping that trend of having A's is going to be so much easier to get the A in the class that you want. But if you don't get that A in that first test, don't worry about it. You at least get a really good assessment of, first off, what are the expectations of your professor, and also whether or not you're doing things right to succeed in the class. So it gives you an opportunity to put your best effort forward in the first test and see whether or not is going to carry you on through the rest of the class. The other thing that I'm going to tell you is that when you are in the class, some of the professors may have scaffolded lecture notes, and scaffolded lecture notes are PowerPoint presentations that have some information or have the stem of the problem and then space for the professor and for you to write as far as the steps to solve the problem. So if your professor does give you, and this is true as far as any of your classes, if your professor gives you access to the PowerPoints before the class, take time to review those PowerPoints before class, and then use those PowerPoints to help guide you for taking notes for the class. For a math class, it's copy everything that's on the board, even if you're not sure you understand it. You can always get clarification after the class. You could go talk to the professor and say, I wrote this down, but I have no idea as far as what it means or how you got to that. Or you could take those lecture notes and go to a tutor and have the tutor work with you as far as deconstructing the process for solving that particular problem. When you can use abbreviations, use them. That way you'll keep up with the professor. And a good set of notes is going to have examples of problems, explanations to solve the problems, vocabulary, and the rules to use. If your professor doesn't give you this information within the class, then what you'll want to do is you'll want to take your notes after class, maybe take the textbook and use the textbook and reviewing the notes to add in more information into your notes so that you've got a complete set of notes to study from and to use as a resource as you're working on your homework. So what if you don't get the A on the first math class? Well, first off, you can use the experience to help you improve your next grade. Second off, it determines if you are in the right math class. If you find like the first couple of days you're sitting in the math class and you are totally lost, then maybe that's a sign that you're not in the right math class. And it's the thing of realizing the fact, if you're not in the right math class, it's better for you to drop that class and drop back to the lower level math class and succeed in that lower level math class. It may take you a little extra time, but remember, it doesn't matter where you start as long as you graduate. So you start a little lower, but you have time within the 4 years to take all of the classes that you need to and do really well. So the other thing that and I have that noted there, so I'm not going to reiterate that. So, all right, so let's see what else. So what else is how to improve your math knowledge? I've already mentioned this before. Please make sure that you review your textbook. Use the textbook to review chapters. Look at if you've got notes from previous math classes that you've taken. They actually are good resources. Or if you've got tests from previous math classes, use that to help drill. Make sure, if at all possible, if you do have to take multiple math courses, and I think this is also true as far as the sciences goes, make sure that you take those classes back to back. Special classes that are the foundation or the prerequisites for the next level class always works better if you schedule them back to back. If you have an opportunity to talk to upperclassmen or talk to someone who's already here at Seton Hall, even some of your advisors or your peer advisor would be able to give you some feedback on the different types of professors that are out there. And if you know what kind of math student you are, then you can ask people, hey, is this person really good at X, Y, Z? And the nice thing is that for the most part, you should be able to match yourself to the best professor that you can for the type of learner that you are. If you end up having that mismatch, then what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to find other resources. And some of those other resources are classmates that you have, as well as some of the resources that we have on campus. And I just wanted to highlight, I'm going to shamelessly plug the Math Learning Lab, because I'm the director of the Math Learning Lab. And the Math Learning Lab, we have an excellent staff of tutors. They're all students who have been really successful in their math classes. We tutor math, statistics, and computer science, all of the lower level classes that the Department of Math and Computer Science offers students. We're located in Arts and Science Hall. So if when you come to visit, we're right across the way from Xavier Hall, and we're on the second floor. The math tutoring is primarily done in the Academic Resource Center, which is in 242. If you haven't gotten a chance to listen to my friend over in the Academic Resource Center as to what kinds of things she offers, please do so. We're also going to have a workshop in July talking about some of the other academic resources that are available on campus. Hours of operation, Monday through Friday. We have tutoring both in person, and some of our tutors do remote. And for the lower level computer science class, we offer something that's called supplemental instruction. And what that is that we have learning assistants that attend the classes with you. And then they run recitations after the class, as well as being available for tutoring outside of the class. And they usually meet on the first floor of Arts and Science Hall. So I'm hoping that I've given you information that helps out. My last slide, I saw that Olivia did post in chat my email address. The other address that we could put into chat is about math placement. Of course, that's the easiest one to remember. It's just math placement at shu.edu. And I answer that email as well. So if you've got questions about math placement particular, that's the place to go. But I do have some time. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to either raise your hand, say something, put it into chat, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And yes, I'm very used to this, of asking a question and it being really, really quiet.
Also, just to remind you guys, you can also type your question if you don't want to unmute yourself. We're just here to help. So any questions you might have, please.
Well, I have a question, and maybe people can put answers in chat. What is your major? You know, I'm interested as far as what people's majors are, so that I make sure that I've given you all the information that I possibly can for the major that you have. So athletic training, great. Marketing, business, all right. Elementary education, great. History and nursing, okay. Oh,
There's a question in the chat. I can read it out loud. It says,
Yes.
for the math bootcamp, do you recommend taking both pre-calculus and pre-algebra simultaneously, or pre-algebra first and then pre-calculus?
Okay, so as far as the math boot camp, is that if ultimately you want to be at pre-calculus or at calculus, then the thing to do is to work in the math boot camp at the highest level that you want to be at, because the program is actually designed that if there are fundamental material that you need to cover, it will pull in that fundamental material that you need. So, but at the same time, but don't take them concurrently, because they're going to they're going to do the same thing. They're going to ask the same information. But if you say, for example, register for the college algebra level prep, if you get done with that, and I'll be monitoring things. If you get completely done with that and then you still have time left on your access code, I can actually transfer you into the next level prep program, and it will carry over the information that you've mastered in the previous prep program. So hopefully that answers your question.
There's another question in the chat. It
Yes.
says, if you scored a 700 plus on the SAT math section, which course are you automatically placed in? And this person's going into a biology major.
Yeah, so you'll go right into Calculus 1. And you won't have to take the placement test. We'll just place you automatically into Calculus 1. You're very welcome. Good question.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, we'll close out this resource workshop section. However, please, you can go check on the university calendar, which the link I've dropped in the chat. We have sessions occurring every Monday and every Wednesday this summer on all different topics, so you can get more information if you need it. There's also the student engagement email, which is something that's very useful. Oh, here's a question. When we can pick our classes in the school schedule for the year. So the school schedule, if you Google Seton Hall academic calendar, that you'll get all the information there. I can say the orientations are happening in June, and it's based on major. There are a few dates in June. You can also Google freshman orientation Seton Hall, and that information will pop up. And I believe you also pick classes at orientation, but don't hold me to that.
I'm going to I'll put the link for the academic calendar in the chat.
Oh, and there's one more question. Analia wants to know if you can sign up for if she can sign up for pre-calculus, or if there's a limited time to complete the course based on the class code.
No, if you the way that the access code works is you're buying 6 weeks access with Alex, and at the end of the 6-week access, if you want to buy more time in the program, you can. So I will say that if you're using the Math Bootcamp to improve your placement, then you need to be finished with the program by the middle of August at the latest.
Any last questions? Okay, Maria wants to know if all 3 placement tests are passed if she starts with calculus.
So if you are in the STEM majors, I don't remember what your major is, but you would be placed into Calculus 1 if that's the class that you need for your major. If you don't need Calculus 1 for your major, then you'll just go into the college level math class that you need for your major. So if you're a business major, you would go into the finite math with calculus. Great. So, for the BS in psychology, yes, you would take calculus 1, and then you would take the, maybe the statistics for science class, as the other math class. So, yes. And, Natita? Sorry, I'm awful as far as names go. The best class for nursing majors, they have you taking the statistical methods for social science. So they tell you which class to take, and most majors will tell you that you're going to be taking statistical methods for social science.
All right, so if that's all the questions, again, we're gonna say goodnight and hope that everybody stays safe. And remember, this recording will be up on our YouTube page, the Seton Hall YouTube page, in a couple days, 3-4 days. But also check back for any of the other resource workshops that we'll be offering every Monday and Wednesday.
Can I just add one more thing? Which is if any of the links that we posted, like my email or the website, please make sure that you grab those before you leave and before we end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.